Dreams and in between, the podcast for neurodivergent weirdos and queers who forget about struggling to adult, they're struggling to human.
At least that's what everyone's telling us.
You're right.
Per usual. But seriously, I'm Angela. People call me Mama Pistachio, bringing sense to the conversation. I help individuals and organizations cultivate skills, spaces, and confidence to advocate for themselves and each other.
And I'm Molly, giving a big fork you to cookie cutter solutions. I help busy as fuck neurodivergent entrepreneurs make shit happen by bringing stability to their businesses while helping them do what makes sense to their brain.
Enough with the chit chat. Let's get down to business. What's the frickin' point?
With our powers combined, we navigate life through the drudgery, dreams, and all that shit in between. Plus, we were already having these conversations anyway, so why not record them, right?
Alrighty then. Get ready to call bullshit on what everyone's saying you should be doing as we navigate the spectrum between what your heart wants and the shit keeping you from it.
Hey, everybody.
Hi.
All right. We have a surprise.
We do.
We kind of told you about it, but it's a surprise. So this is going to be our first ever guest episode, and I'm very excited about it. When Angela and I were first talking about bringing a guest on, we were like, who should the guest be? And the person that is here with us today was the first person we both thought of. So, Angela, do you want to introduce her?
I absolutely do. I'm so excited to introduce a fellow educator and a dear friend, Rebecca A. Weiner, M.Ed. Is here with us today. She is a dynamic educator, a lifelong learner, and creator of Learn, Play, Grow educational consulting. She supports transformational growth for young children with diverse abilities and their families, teachers, and schools through play-based learning, parent and teacher coaching, and inclusion support in schools. Rebecca's education experience and expertise make Learn, Play, Grow unique. She earned a master's degree in education and completed a residency in Rice University's School Literacy and Culture program, as well as a fellowship in leadership education for autism and neurodevelopmental disabilities. Rebecca is a certified positive discipline parent educator, DIR floor time practitioner, and early communication professional trained and licensed by the Hannon Center. Rebecca created Learn, Play, Grow to reimagine education in ways that build connection, support communication, and enrich teaching and learning for people of all abilities. Please welcome our friend Rebecca.
Hey, Rebecca. I'm going to move you in the middle. There you go. Okay.
I'm so excited to be here. Thank you so much for welcoming me.
So excited to have you.
Yes. Oh, my. Okay. So, prepping for this episode, I read through all the notes, and I was like, I love the notes. I love them. And I think I
We had a big conversation that was going to be like 30 minutes, Rebecca and I, and then it ended up being like an hour and maybe 10 minutes or so.
Yeah.
So we just sent you the transcript.
Yeah.
All the things.
And I'm pretty sure the transcript was cut off even still, because it was like, I am going to, and then there was like nothing. And I was like, okay, I'm going in blind, and that's okay. But the rest of it was really good. And my husband tried to sit next to me, and I was like, I am reading notes next to me. This is important podcast prep. And I know Angela had told you, but I was like, I am intimidated by this conversation, and I feel totally underqualified.
That's okay. I'm intimidated doing a live show, and I feel totally overwhelmed. So we're going to walk this journey together.
We're going to do
I'm not
together.
intimidated because I just don't get intimidated.
Well,
unless I have to write like social media posts and stuff like that, but I'm not doing that for this. Molly does that.
Yes, which just comes to the point that like we all do certain things really well without any fear, and then the other things,
Yeah.
So I know, Angela has questions prepped for you, but I'm just very excited for the whole thing.
So one of the things that led us, Rebecca, to wanting you here. So Molly has a child, a young child who is in school, and we navigate child
Yes.
things together, and she likes to ask me questions because as an educator and one who is very out of the box and thinks differently, we talk about things like, how can you go into the school and have discussions about the IEP, and what kind of questions can you ask, and what can you expect from them? And if they say these kinds of things, how can you
Mhm.
be prepared to really advocate for yourself, for them? Like, right? Like, Molly is a great parent who wants to advocate for herself and her child, but also wants to advocate for the school staff and make sure that they're
Beautiful.
having the things that they need, right?
So
Yeah.
needed. So needed.
Yeah, isn't it? Like, oh my gosh, they work together as a team.
What?
Yeah.
You mean this is a
Well,
partnership?
yeah. Well, and I
No.
was reading those notes, and like everything you were describing is like the ideal situation for like the parent teacher dynamic for having a kid who needs extra supports at school. I was like, we are so fortunate. Like I knew we were fortunate, don't get me wrong, but like we're so lucky and privileged to have the opportunity to have a school that works with us so well. And I was like, that was very much like a kudos to the school.
Yes.
I was reading that. So
It
yeah.
is a partnership, and it's beautiful that you see it that way, because sometimes there's this unnecessarily adversarial relationship between the family and the school. The school is following their procedural safeguards. The family isn't always aware of their rights, and things get a bit messy. But when we start from a place of compassionate curiosity about what does the child need, what do the parents need, what does the school need, we can build from there in a much better way.
Yes. And that, like for me, I came from a family who had educators, who had fellow cousins who were neurodivergent themselves or had some type of high support needs. And so I always watched people advocate or have communication to get things that they needed. And
Mhm.
so our like when we did early intervention through the school system for Blaine, and we got home care that wasn't ABA and all of those things. From the get-go, I was like, I saw this, I think I need this. Do you guys do that? If you don't do that, I need to find somebody who does. Like, and I had the skills. I knew enough to be dangerous, I guess is
Mm.
really the thing. Because I was like, I hear this, I know that this meant this for my cousin. What
Mhm.
does this mean for Blaine? And so I was able to kind of know what's possible coming in. And I feel like that's the biggest problem for parents and teachers in that case, because teachers, educators don't know how the parents are going to respond to anything. And I'm sure, having been on the receiving end of numerous not so great experiences, that they are very traumatized by having to tell a parent, I think your kid might need some extra help in this department. But I was fortunate enough to know from my experiences, my husband's experiences, and like seeing other people what could happen. And I don't think a lot of parents do. So they're just scared into anger. If that makes sense.
Can I just hold space for a moment and honor you for being Blaine's champion and having the
Oh,
courage to see and to advocate? I speak with so many families who have been talked out of their intuition and their inner knowing, and teaching families to question their self-trust is never in the best interest of the child. And
no.
that
Oh my God.
conversation about, when I was a classroom teacher, the list of things that I was not allowed to say was endless. And I always had a child that needed more one-on-one, and I always had a family that wanted wraparound services. And this is part of why I created Learn, Play, Grow, because the four walls of a classroom not only didn't contain the ambition, but they didn't allow me to serve in the most necessary capacity. And now when I coach teachers, we talk about a sequence of steps to start this conversation. Often what happens is there's a withholding of information. It's very well intentioned. We don't want to burden the family, so we're not going to say anything until the pattern just gets too strong and we're forced to. And then the family, often in October, which is freak out and kick out month, they get this deluge of negativity. Their trust is broken. They're given an ultimatum, and it doesn't need to work that way.
Mm-hmm.
So I start with ownership. So, I'm seeing A, B, and C. I'm curious, are you seeing this too? And then we invite partnership. Tell us what you're wondering about. And then we get curious about what could that be? What could we try? And then we make a commitment. Who's going to do what on what timeline, communicating how, and when will we reconvene? So instead of Tommy's a little whacked out, he's a punk, and he's doing these things that are just not okay in our school, and he really can't come back until you get him some support, which, believe me, I've heard that conversation. It sounds a lot more like, we are so grateful to have Tommy as part of our learning community. We've noticed that under A, B, and C conditions, we'll sometimes see P, Q, and R. I'm wondering, are you seeing this at home? Oh, it sounds like you have similar concerns. Well, let's work together to make a plan of action. I'm curious, if we tried X, Y, and Z, we can do this at school. Would you be willing to do this at home? Fabulous. We have a commitment. We're each going to try these 3 strategies. Let's come back together in 3 weeks, and I'll keep a notebook at school and I'll send it home in his backpack each day so that you can see what's happening at school, and please write back so we can see what's happening at home in real time. And we'll make the most of these 3 weeks so that when we come back together, we all have the same information and we can build on those strengths. That's a very different conversation.
Absolutely. And I think that we've been fortunate enough to have teachers that have that conversation with us. Well, not to mention, I am an over talker. I over explain everything. So I'm always like, okay, you're the new teacher. You need the lowdown. Like you need all of the things that are in my brain, because I want you to be the most prepared, and I don't want you to be like, holy crap, this child is beating the shit out of me and I don't know why. I would rather you be like, oh, I'm prepared to notice some signs that overstimulation is happening, so you do not get punched in the face.
Yes.
And so we've been definitely fortunate. And so I love that you help teachers, and you've done this yourself, that you help them understand, like, there's a different way to then being like, Tommy's a punk.
And it's an incremental process. There's a lot of planting seeds. So this is a garden of learning for everyone, the child, the family, the teacher, the school leaders. And often families and schools are not ready to see things. And so we plant the seed and we nurture it. And by having this incremental in real time, rather than the withholding and the deluge, we're building trust throughout the process so that when both parties are ready to see and to do, they have a strong relationship. That relationship is the foundation on which everything that needs to happen will happen. But anything we do to fracture, compromise, or sacrifice that relationship is never in the best interest of the child.
Yes, agree, 100%.
So Rebecca has a fan. Somebody is adding some lovely little comments here for you, and I love this. Here's my favorite one. Other than being told that Rebecca's the bomb, it says Rebecca takes her little humans and their families on amazing journeys of growth. So I really love this. She does rock. I really love this because we called this episode Meeting in the Messy Middle. Mm-hmm. So you've talked a little bit about this being a messy thing, and it's a messy journey, right? How difficult is messy when you're talking to, I really want you, if you can, to give the perspective of the kid, the parent, and the teacher, because each has a different experience in this, and you, being the amazing educator and inclusionist who you are, get to see all of that from an outside perspective. Yes. So can you give us a little baby messy middle journey?
Sure. Well, first I'd like to start by defining this messy middle. Here's the way I see it. We have an inclination that what's happening isn't working, or we have an inkling rather that what's happening isn't working, but we don't yet have an inclination to change. So we're dwelling between the inkling and the inclination and getting lost. And what that often looks like as a child that becomes easily dysregulated by auditory overstimulation will start screaming. Or when somebody comes into that child's space, they go into fight or flight and they start lashing out, and they're labeled as aggressive. So they're segregated from their peers. They're often pulled aside and asked, did you just do that thing I know you just did? Why did you just do that thing? I am so disappointed. Do you hear my voice? Do you hear how disappointed I am? Which is totally shaming. And might I just say that for children who struggle to generalize or for whom transitions are challenging, removing them from the situation, putting them on the defensive by demanding that they explain themselves, when if they could access language and logic, they would have in context, and then separating them from their peers without any support to rejoin, it's just totally stigmatizing and counterproductive. So what the parents hear is, your child is aggressive and lacks empathy. And I remember being hired by a family to come consult. And before I come into any classroom, I always seek a 360 perspective. So I will ask the teachers, the family, and the school leaders, what are the child's interests and strengths? What are your interests and strengths in relation to the child? How do you define the opportunity/problem? What strategies have been tried, and what support do you think would be meaningful? And these questions offer me a lot of insight into the mindset and practices of every party involved. So I remember being hired by a family who was afraid their son was going to be thrown out of a school. I sent these questions to the teachers, and about an hour before I walk into the classroom, I finally get an email that says, the child is aggressive and lacks empathy. And my first thought was, judgmental much? That's not a very gracious characterization. And I reminded myself, get curious before accusatory. I could walk into that classroom and use confirmation bias to find every piece of evidence that supports that they're judgmental. Or I could look beyond what I perceived as judgment and get curious about what they might be thinking and feeling. When they describe a child as aggressive, perhaps they're afraid. They don't understand the child's needs or behavior, and they don't know how to keep that child or the other children safe. When they say the child lacks empathy, perhaps what they mean is, I have really good intentions and I want to help this child become the best version of themselves that they can be, but I don't know how to teach this skill. So then instead of seeing them as bad, cruel, developmentally inappropriate practitioners, I can go in and find that messy middle of, I see that you really care about the children and you want to keep this class safe. Let's work together to understand the child's development. I wonder if what looks like aggression is actually dysregulation that expressed through behavior. So if we can better understand what the child needs and help the child learn their cues, then they can become self-advocates. And let's reframe this idea of empathy. Empathy is based on theory of mind, the understanding that different people have different perspectives. Theory of mind is a neurotypical norm. It's not universal. And the idea that we're going to try to teach a neurotypical norm to a developmentally diverse child is not affirming or strengths-based. What if we step outside of that and say, if we do believe in theory of mind, that's not going to come online for another 2 to 3 years beyond where this child is right now. So they're not failing at being empathetic. That's just not developmentally appropriate for them to have that skill if they were quote unquote neurotypical, not a term that I prefer. So then we have to question our assumptions. But that's kind of a snippet of, here's what the child is experiencing. They're just overwhelmed and they don't know how to regulate. So they manifest that in their behavior. Here's what the parents are hearing. My kid is aggressive and lacks empathy, and these people don't love my child, and is my child even safe? And the teachers are wondering, how do I keep them safe? And I feel like I'm failing. But nobody says, we're really curious about what's going on here. Instead, it all becomes very pointed. And so one of my jobs is to kind of sand the edges and turn them from pointed accusations into growing edges. And that's where we'll meet each other, and that's where we'll grow from.
That is an amazing 360 perspective, as you put it. Like, it's great to, and I think I figured this out from you talking to me about something one time, was like, or maybe just reading your newsletters, because they're always chock full with helpful things. But it was the concept of like, Blaine is a tiny human with feelings regardless of what I'm seeing or what it appears to be, and that I need to approach Blaine, and Angela helped me figure out ways to do this, to communicate in a way that Blaine could understand. Like, I remember one time I was like, I just need to know, I ask him what he feels or what they feel, and they just go, I don't know. And Angela goes, ask him what he thinks. And I was like, oh,
yeah.
Oh, got you. And like, so now I say, oh, it looks like you're feeling this when I'm trying to assign emotions to help them learn. And Blaine uses they, them pronouns. So if I'm confusing people who don't know, I now say, oh, what are you thinking about? Because so many racing thoughts in that little tiny human brain. And I never know what, like, I think we're having a conversation about A and we're actually having something about YX. And like, I was totally unaware that we were on a completely different planet. And
I share a story about that.
Yes.
So when I was a classroom teacher, I taught in a community that had been devastated by floods 3 years in a row. So our littles had been evacuated by the National Guard. They'd been in shelters. They'd seen all kinds of things that most children don't experience. And so when the clouds would roll in right before playground time, the children would whimper by the window. And the easy assumption is they're sad because it looks like it's going to rain and they can't go outside. But there was one little guy that just wasn't walking away from the window. And one of the teachers called, get away from the window. Well-intentioned, we're going to circumvent this whole meltdown by just asking him to leave the window, except we know that children have object permanence. So they know that the clouds are rolling in even when they're not looking out the window. So I just sat down next to this little guy and I said, what's your idea? And he points out the window and he says, where are the birds going to live? He wasn't whimpering because the clouds were rolling in. He was watching the gardeners prune the trees. And a child who had lost his home was worried that the birds would not have any branches on which to build a nest. And so we dictated a letter to the gardeners and we built nests with Play-Doh and with play materials. And when I spoke with his parents later that day, we cried together because this child had gone from a place of trauma to a place of empathy and curiosity. And we never would have known that if we had just continued saying, get away from the window. So it's all about that curiosity.
Yeah. So I want to use this as an example to continue the conversation that we were just having about so many of us being labeled as not having empathy. So if that had not have happened, here's what this could look like, and I've seen too many times. Hey, I told you need to get away from the window. Come on, let's go. And maybe even going and grabbing the hand and pulling them away. And then the child reacting and maybe acting out with aggression and being frustrated and having a temper tantrum. And for those who are listening and not watching, I have really big quotes going on over here. Because they're not throwing a tantrum. This is not a tantrum. This is not, oh, hey, I really want you to give me what I want. This is, you don't understand. You're not listening to me. There are really big emotions happening here, big thoughts, and so much empathy. And often that is it's missed. And it is not only missed, but dismissed.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
It's just, so one of our viewers, we've got Dr. Alyssa Cohen is on here, and she is saying that you are amazing and that you have a really dynamic way of observing little learners, and that is absolutely the truth. And then we've got another person saying not many big humans understand what little humans are saying and feeling. And I'm going to say not many big humans understand what they themselves are saying and feeling. So from the teacher perspective, here's what I saw and what led me on the path to where I am now. I saw traumatized teachers who had never been, or I should say traumatized humans who had never been taught how to regulate their own self, who were themselves dysregulated.
Yes.
And trying to fit within this box and within this system that is, whether we like it or not, it's a capitalistic system and it's very rigid.
Mm-hmm.
And so I saw, looking at these teachers, going, if they are dysregulated, how can they possibly co-regulate
Yes.
30 other people? So what we need to do as, at that time I was looking at it as, what can I do as a leader in the school community to help teachers understand? And it's more than just stress management.
Mm-hmm.
It's regulation, which is not a word that is ever used
Yeah.
unless you're really familiar with being neurodivergent.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Right? So we need to get this, like, working and understanding neurodivergence in general. It doesn't just help this, what people think is a minority group of
Mm-hmm.
people. It helps
Right.
everybody, because the
Yeah.
things that work and help us
Yeah.
work and help other people as well.
True story. And Angela, I am so glad that you framed it that way, because I remember in the moment being so frustrated that the teachers could not honor the humanity of the child. And you're helping me realize nobody was honoring the humanity of the teachers. They themselves had also been traumatized. And here they are watching somebody else act out their own trauma and needing to shut it down because they didn't have the capacity to deal with it in that moment. They made the best decision they could with the spoons that they had available. And one of my missions is really to honor the humanity of our teachers. They are stuck in a system where the expectations are unrealistic and often competing. And there's very little capacity in terms of mental and emotional energy to step outside of that and examine from a different perspective. We know that sometimes learning something new involves grief. Oh my God, I see what I was doing. How could I have done that? Or fear. If I think differently about that, I might have to think differently about other things. It's easier just not to know, because if I know, I'll feel compelled to do. It's that goodness that brings teachers into the field in the first place. Teachers
Right.
are great,
Yep.
not for what they know, but for what they're willing to learn. And we do not exist within an educational system that affirms the humanity of educators and treats them as lifelong learners. Shouldn't a school of all places be the safest place to say, I don't know? I'm curious about that. Let me get back to you about that. I once had a little learner in a classroom where I was supporting inclusion go home and tell his family, Miss Rebecca doesn't know anything. She says she learns something new every day. Yes, I'm really glad that you get that Miss Rebecca learns something new every day. I love your creative interpretation. I love that his family was comfortable enough to come tell me that. But yet we've got to normalize not knowing. And we've got to stop demonizing unlearning. Changing your mind is not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of critical thinking and courageous decision making.
I am always like, I mean, even in what I do I'm technically teaching people, I guess, when I'm doing brand stuff or business stuff, but I'm constantly like, it's okay to change your mind. It's okay to realize that what you were doing is not what you like and you want to change direction, and you don't owe anybody an explanation for that, because it's your choice to change your mind and you're allowed to do that. And it's just, I feel like that's just a life lesson across the board. Like, you are a different person every moment of every day because you've experienced something new, and that is influencing how you act and respond to things. And so, yeah, you're gonna fucking change your mind.
Yeah.
Like, because you've learned something new and you are using that to now better understand and use critical thinking and problem solve that scenario. It's like Blaine is really into Pokemon.
Oh, yeah.
So we are fully in that train. Like, we've probably acquired several locomotives on the Pokemon train at this point.
Yes.
And so we go to tournaments, and we bought Blaine a deck, and Blaine has been learning that deck because they don't read yet, but they are very good at assigning phrases or words to pictures. So like more like early learning, early reading, and so Blaine has memorized the cards in their deck. And it's so interesting because we've gotten to a point now that Blaine says, Mom, I want you to play this deck, my deck, or the Calorax deck, and I'm going to play your deck. And I realized yesterday that they do that to watch how I utilize the cards and learn a new way to do it. Because then we switched again, and Blaine was using very complex strategy to beat the crap out of me in this game. And it's just amazing because Blaine's 5.
Yeah.
And plays that deck very fluidly without reading, but they know the cards, they know how to play them, and they know how to do something. And Blaine turned to my husband yesterday and goes, I have a plan for the next turn, and Mom's not going to like it. And like, but that is like a real life scenario of why you can change your mind. Like, you are learning these new strategies. You are learning how to adapt to a new situation. And I see it like we are very open and honest with our teaching team every time, or the whole entire care team of people that we have. There's an army at this point. Yes. And I remember the first time last year with the new teaching team, we had home visits because we were in early childhood preschool and the school system does home visits. And I was like, if Blaine does not use what you deem the appropriate pronouns and uses they, them pronouns for themselves or others, I don't want you to correct them because we've taught Blaine not to assume gender. And the teacher assistant turns to the teacher and goes, that is the best idea I've ever heard. We need to incorporate that into the classroom. Because up until that point, nobody had said, well, you don't know what baby doll that, like the baby doesn't have, like that specific baby doll does not have any gender. So why could you can assume the gender of that baby doll, let the kid, and so it was like a learning moment. So like, there's always constantly something that you're learning. And I feel like that's very important.
That's amazing. Educators with growth mindset are my heroes. I mean, Carol Dweck talks about this fixed mindset where things are predetermined. They are what they are. They will not change. And then this growth mindset where we sit with compassionate curiosity and we re-examine and we move in different directions. And I would just like to affirm for you, Molly, the beauty of the power of play. Seeing Pokemon as a learning experience. When I see kids with Pokemon and Minecraft, and people dismiss that as, oh, it's just play. Well, first of all, it's never just play. Play is the way. But secondly, you get all of the levels of learning there. They're learning a whole language, a whole culture. And you're absolutely right. Our neurodiverse kiddos are often the ones that are off to the side and observing, and they need to see you do it before they do it. And we don't even give them the chance to do that. We get into the cajoling. Oh, come on. You got to do it. Do you see how they're doing it? Don't you want to do it? And we just like spew all over them instead of just trusting them. Yeah, they're going to join when they're ready. They're going to get out of this what they're going to get out of it. And if you go in predetermined what everything needs to look like and what pronouns everything needs to use, you're going to totally miss what this kid could learn and teach you.
Yeah.
And it happens all the time.
It does. It happens all the time. That's the norm. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, that's the norm. Yeah. Molly's experience is not the norm. That is not what I have seen time and time and time and time again. And it doesn't mean that the teachers weren't good teachers.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that the support staff wasn't good. It doesn't mean that the administrators were bad people. It just means that the system is flawed.
Yep.
The system has to be changed.
Yeah.
And until that happens, we're going to continue to have people having really negative experiences within that system, whether it's the teachers, the administrators, the parents, the whole community, and definitely the kids themselves. So one of the things I wrote down from our previous conversation, Rebecca, I wrote down, because you've said this, creating a pattern of expressing curiosity and inviting the family and partnership. And I know you mentioned that at the beginning of this as well. I called you Rebecca the gardener. And gardening is messy, right? Like you cannot
yeah.
garden without making a big mess. What does that look like, being the gardener? For teachers
Mm.
who are listening, for parents who are listening, um, how do you tend that garden?
Oh, that is such a good question. So, as I said earlier, there's a lot of seed planting. There's a lot of sitting with what could be before people are willing to entertain that. There is a lot of crawling in the mud and pulling up some weeds, which often doesn't make me someone's favorite person. Um, and there's also getting everybody else's idea about what this garden could look like. I remember once a therapist asking me, if I asked you to draw a rose, what would you do? And I explained, well, I would draw the soil and then the stem, and there would be thorns, and then there would be leaves, and there would be petals. And of course, there's the sky, and there's the cloud, and there's the sun, and there are the people enjoying it. And this person so affirmingly said, well, that's how your brain works. So let's make that work. And that's how I see the garden. There are all of these different players. And if I just come in with my weed whacker, my leaf blower, and just blow everybody to oblivion because I've decided that I know what's right, well, they can't dwell in that garden. They're never going to see the beauty of that garden. So gardeners go through a process and they often don't even see the fruits of their labor, but they lay the foundation, they till the soil, they plant the seed, they nurture it. And even if I never see the fruit that it will bear, I hope that I am teaching each member of that gardening team the skills they need to nurture their own vision. And those are skills that they will take forth into whatever garden in life they go into.
Ah, I love that so much. Okay, I love this about. Um, so here's why I love this. I have an article that has been saved in my favorites for 12 years.
Ooh, I love it.
It is like the leftmost saved thing. And I shared it with the teachers who I worked with at least twice a year, sometimes more, depending on if they needed to hear it, or I would bring people back to it. And it talked about the 99. So in order to get all the way up to 100, right, which that's what we're all aiming for, is we want these kids, you know, to be able to be 100% of their potential. And we're looking at that, but they struggle along the way. And we as teachers are not there for the entire journey from beginning to end. But we have, and parents too, we have this mentality that we are. That there's a whole bunch of hundreds along the way.
Oh my gosh, you're right.
Right? Whereas actually, maybe I'm 25.
Yeah.
But without 25,
right,
we can't get to 26 or 27 and then build on up to 100. And I think changing that mindset, like you were just talking, we often don't see the fruits of our labor. You know, as I taught mostly middle school for the majority of, I am not a good elementary school teacher because I can't deal with the sounds and the smells and the snot and I cannot deal with that. I get dysregulated very quickly with all of the touches and the, you know, I don't do well. So I stayed away from elementary. So I taught in middle school, and oftentimes my kids would graduate from high school and they would come and see me, or they'd come and see me throughout high school. And there were so many things that they would say, because of you, you said this, you did this, I learned this from you. Yeah. Or a teacher at the high school level would send me an email and say, this kid said, you know, Miss Locascio taught me this. And now we're using that with the whole class.
Isn't that the best?
It is the best. And we don't always see it and we don't always hear it, but it doesn't mean it's not there. Yeah. And I think it's something that if we could get into that mentality of it's okay that I don't see the fruits of my labor.
Yeah.
It's okay that I don't see the 100. And it's okay that I'm not there because I'm part of the process.
Yeah.
You
Oh,
know,
that's such a
I'm
blessing.
weeding the garden, I'm tending the garden, I'm nurturing the garden, but it's somebody else's job to pick the fruit, to pick the vegetables, to decide when it's ready, to
Mm.
make the, you know, to make the food after. It's a never-ending cycle. But that's not how we think of it when we're in it.
That is so helpful. Can I just say thank you, because I desperately needed to hear that, and it's what I didn't know I needed to know. But yes, we live in this full throttle 100% all the time. Average is bad. And I've been doing a lot of learning about anti-capitalism and anti-diet culture, and the idea of aim for C plus. C plus
Mhm.
is slightly above average, and that's okay. But like when I coach really overwhelmed parents and I ask them to map out everything that they give their mental and emotional and physical energy to every day, and it adds up to like 6,000%. You
Yeah.
cannot give 100% to your children, 100% to your spouse, 100% to your job, 100% to your parents, and have anything left for you. It's statistically impossible. And I think we also take this 100% mentality into our children's activities. I have been to so many soccer shot games and plays and basketball games for my students, for my family. Let's be honest. These kids are not bending it like Beckham. They're not going to go to Juilliard, and that's not the point. The point is that they're learning to be a part of a team. They're learning to be vulnerable and face rules that don't make sense to them and learn strategies that are challenging for their bodies and to be present and visible in front of people. And that's the learning. And so when
Yep.
I think about like my nieces and nephews drama teacher, Miss Eva, in my mind, she hung the moon because she gave these children a voice and a stage and a place to shine in all of their uniqueness. And I don't care what happens after that. Like, oh my God, what a blessing. But yeah, we have our like overperforming culture, constantly hustling. Your kid has to take 6,524 extracurriculars because they have to get into the good school, to get into the good this. I remember my first job out of college, ladies. I was so disappointed they did not want to see my transcript. I graduated summa cum laude, and I was like, I lived in the library for 4 years in a cultural mecca. You better damn well want to see all of the classes that I aced and how well I did. I'm like, oh, I missed out on some life learning there. I was in a cultural mecca and living in the library.
Yep.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think I s- oh, I feel like the little's waking up. Um, we did not sleep last night. We went to bed at 4:30.
Whew.
We have a sick little today.
Oh,
Sick little. So the little was not supposed to be home for this, but the little may be making an appearance. Um, so I see so many times parents of little or older kids are like, well, why didn't you color in the lines? Or why didn't you get an A on your math exam? Or I'm like, you realize that you who preach about perfectionism is literally teaching this child that they have to be a perfectionist to be valued. And like that is not okay. Somebody was talking to me, they're like, well, they got a B plus and that's terrible. And I'm like, they got a B plus.
oh my
Like,
gosh.
if they get a passing grade, that means they absorbed something
Yes.
and they're learning something.
Yeah.
A means significantly above average. Like, you can't, like,
Yeah.
can you appreciate that they learned something in a subject that they don't understand and then they tried their hardest? Like, I just don't get it. Like, some kids are never going to get math, like, to the level that people expect them to. Like, I can teach everybody math. I can't do the math.
Yeah. I mean,
I
this
can
is
teach somebody how to do that. I don't know how
all
to do
about
it.
enoughness and creativity. I was doing an observation in a classroom recently where the children were having snack outdoors. These are 2-year-olds, and they're eating those tubes of squeezable yogurt, really difficult for 2-year-olds to navigate, and crackers. And one of the kids squeezes the yogurt onto the cracker. And the teacher says, we're not doing that. Not my favorite phrase. We always say we're not doing that when somebody's actually doing that. So let's A, not lie to the children, but B, ask ourselves, why? Think about all of the motor planning that went into him stabilizing the cracker, turning the yogurt upside down, squeezing it, not getting it all over himself, and then holding the cracker. And he so brilliantly was licking the yogurt off. And he knew when to flatten the cracker out so that the yogurt didn't fall on his shirt. That is a real life physicist at the age of 2. Now we're so focused on, if you do that, you're going to make a mess, and then I'm going to have to clean it up. And oh my God. And if you do it, and then they do it, and then everyone's going to do it. And then the world is just going to be a huge conflagration, and we're going to live in vans down by the river. It's snack. Like, deep breaths.
And that right there was the fight flight response that so many adults have when we're watching our children do something that is going to create what we see as chaos in our lives. And we get into this, there's no alternative but the worst outcome of this. That's where we go so often.
Oh, yeah. And then it doesn't occur to us that maybe the mess is the teachable moment. I have another kiddo who we're really working on executive functioning. So when we had snack together and somebody knocked over their yogurt drink and it went all over the table, I start noticing and narrating, I see that there's yogurt on the table. What can we do? And he says, clean it up. Great idea. What do we need to clean it up? Should we use a broom? No, Miss Becca, we need towels. I wonder how many towels should we get? 2 towels or 3 towels? I think we need this many towels. Great idea. And then he puts them on the table and it doesn't fully absorb. I'm like, oh, I see that there's more yogurt. Should we just walk away? Oh, no, Miss Becca, we need to clean it all up. And then I've got these messy, yogurty napkins in my hand. Should I just put this in my pocket? Oh, no, Miss Becca, it's wet. It will make your pocket wet. It goes in the trash, Miss Becca. I'm like, yeah. All of that is inside this child. And if I just swoop in and I solve the problem for him, then what does he learn? And just these little curiosity questions, these guiding questions helped his teachers. He didn't need the questions. He knew what to do. His teachers needed to see this is his thought process. Instead of assuming that he doesn't know, instead of doing for him, instead of assuming that his response is a delay or off the mark, just watch how his brain thinks. He just helped interpret, problem solve, and then transition to the next thing. That's the very thing that they're afraid he doesn't know how to do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, Rebecca does know how to talk to these little humans.
Absolutely.
And it's, so one of the things that I noticed is, and you probably see this in the classroom a lot, when a child is regulated, they know the things that they need to do most of the time. You can be like, oh, what do you do when you're frustrated? Oh, I take a deep breath, or, oh, I walk away, or, oh, I find my heavy stuffy, or whatever their learning thing is. And while we were in OT, I kept getting reports of Blaine knows this stuff and doesn't need to be in OT. And I'm like, if Blaine can do it while they're regulated, that's great. But that's not our problem.
Right.
The problem is that when we are dysregulated, we cannot access that part of our brain.
Right.
Blaine needs to be in OT because we continue to be dysregulated at school and we're having these issues. And I feel like people forget that the brain only works the way you want it to when you're feeling great and you're feeling good and you're feeling regulated. Because as an adult, there are many times where I am like, just not having a good day. I'm overstimulated. Our house is very echoey. And Blaine does something that is completely innocent. But it is the most painful thing I have heard in my life. And I lash out. And we can have my big noises. And then I have to go, well, Molly, you are fucking dysregulated. Stop yelling at your kid. And then I go, oh, buddy, mommy is dysregulated. And Blaine goes, yeah, you are. Hold your hands tight and take deep breaths. Because that's what Blaine learned at therapy. And so now when I am dysregulated, Blaine will announce to the entire target, Mom, you're dysregulated. Hold your hands together and take deep breaths and think happy thoughts. And I feel
Life
like that
lesson
is
on
something,
aisle 6. Love it.
right? And I feel like that is something like Blaine can access that when regulated and can even help others identify, hey, could you try this? This is a helpful tool. But like, we need to be able to, like, I feel like there's 3 things I'm trying to say at once and it's not working.
You're on a journey.
So,
We're here with you.
okay. So we have to show the kids, oh, adults can get dysregulated too, and we need help sometimes, and make sure that it's okay for them to be like, oh, this is normal. B, I feel like we also need to remember that in the moments when we're dysregulated, we cannot access our own things as adults who may be emotionally mature or not. So how can we expect these littles to do that if we don't practice? Like, we have to practice when we're regulated, but we also need to try and help them as they're becoming dysregulated to access those things so that they can do that themselves. And I think that's the part where most parents who are early in this journey don't realize that's where we need to be.
Yeah.
Because nobody's told us.
Yeah.
And I feel like teachers are in the same boat. Like, if I as a parent don't say, hey, this is the list of when we start to realize that there's some dysregulation happening, if I don't pass that along to the teacher,
Right.
the teacher has to make their own list, which is just not helpful when there's 30 other children in the classroom. And now I'm trying to annotate 30 lists of dysregulation because they're all going to get dysregulated. Like, I feel like it really is important that the parents help the teachers by providing and being open and honest about their kiddos, regardless of their brains. And then the teachers can be like, oh, I feel like it helps the teachers realize we're a team. And I feel like a lot of times parents feel like they have to be secretive. Teachers probably also feel like they have to be like, I don't want to, like, you know, that wasn't a sentence, but I think you got what I was saying.
Oh, I totally
Can't wait to see that one on the transcript.
Yeah. But I have always felt like, and even like my partner when navigating new work experiences or whatever, I've always been the person that's like, yeah, I am a squeaky velociraptor. I am super anxious. I'm afraid of everything. I'll still try it, but I might cry the whole time. Like, I've always been, this is me, accept it or get out, we go away. And it's allowed me more access to things because I'm blunt from the beginning and they're prepared.
Right.
And I feel like it's important for us as parents to do the same thing for our kiddos and be accepting of who they are by being like, this is me. I'm going to need some help. Moving on. And I feel like that is something that also needs to be more widespread for everyone. Like, just disclose the things that you know are going to become a problem.
I have to jump on let's look at this from an intersectional perspective here. Yes, I agree. Normal is a setting on the dryer. Thank you.
That's true, Alyssa. Normal Sucks. Jonathan Mooney's book, Normal Sucks. Read it. It's amazing.
Okay, we need to put that in the put that in the notes. Okay. I work predominantly in schools that had 90% plus free and reduced lunches. So these are considered high needs schools. I think all schools are high needs, but the needs in these areas are very, they're very different, and we have to look at how we are, because I love everything that Molly is saying, and many of the parents do not feel safe and comfortable doing that. And there are a whole bunch of different cultural reasons for that. One, being dismissed continuously as unintelligent or not knowing what's best for your child, or as a community because of bias and racism and things like that. Two, because your culture says teachers are highly educated, highly respected. They're the most respected thing, and we don't have the right to tell them because they already know. And that is there are cultures that have that, where teachers are put up here, and because of that narrative, that communication doesn't happen. So not only do we need parents to be sharing, but we need to provide a psychologically safe space so that
Yes.
parents feel that they
Yes.
can share.
Yeah.
And that was one of the things. I have all these tattoos, and I'm different, and and the parents who would come and talk to me at parent teacher conferences, I would sit at a table, and I would have parents who would come and just like hang out, or I always wanted to be there during the beginning of the year when we were doing orientation and enrollment. For those several weeks that we're doing enrollment, I wanted to be there because parents saw me
Mhm.
and they felt comfortable and safe with me. Just because I looked more like them.
Mhm.
But again, that was the white parents because I'm white. So we would have white parents who were looking at me and saying, "She looks like somebody who understands me." But then we're in a school where there's no black teachers. There are no brown teachers. The only people in the school who are not white are custodians and other service type providers. What does that say to these parents? So we
Mhm.
have that as well on
Yeah.
top of all of these other things that we have to acknowledge as a system. So there we are, going back to the system. And I think that needs to be a whole like episode in and of itself of talking about that. And I think, Rebecca, we're going to ask you to come back. Molly and I have already decided that you're probably going to be the like recurring guest
I
who
mean,
we're going to
you have
ask.
to okay this. You have to give us your
Yes,
consent to do that.
of
To be
course, of
fair.
course. But we think that there are going to be people who really want to and need to hear your message and what you have to say. Yes, bring her back. That's the
Can I
message that we just got.
I love this. Can I bring us full circle? Because I think everything that you've shared really speaks to this idea of we're at 100%. We're at our preconceived notion of the destination, and we are beckoning people over. And what we really need to do is meet people where they are. We
Yep.
don't know what we don't know. And often families don't know what they're seeing or how to share it. And teachers don't know how to share what they're seeing, or they say nothing because they don't know what they're seeing. And so I would like to create an invitation for all of us to accept that we don't know what we don't know,
Yep.
that it's okay to learn and to unlearn. It's okay not to know, but it's not okay not to try to learn. It's okay to change your mind. It's not okay to deny other people the right to change their mind. And if we were to step into this mindset and give ourselves and each other a little bit more grace, and I get that to really stressed out teachers and overwhelmed parents, this sounds a little crunchy granola, like, Rebecca, go hug your tree and wear your Birkenstocks. I get it, but I promise you it's possible. I have invested blood, sweat, and tears in making this happen. It is a messy middle, but it is the first step to the next part of what could possibly happen. And I promise you it's better than staying on the path that you're on, where parents are overwhelmed, they feel like they're failing, kids are overstimulated, and they have no idea what success is even possible, let alone how to make it happen. Teachers feel like they have to pick who they're going to fail. Do I fail the kid? Do I fail the parents? Do I fail the administrators? I feel like a failure. Why am I even trying this? And then we all end up spinning our wheels.
Yep.
And I'm here to say, let's slow it down just long enough to honor our own and each other's humanity, and trust that we all have something in common. We want what's best for this kid, and we may see and define that differently, but let's focus on the fact that we have something in common. And we can walk this journey together, not pushing each other, not yelling at each other, not shaming or blaming, but just accepting that we're all learning and unlearning.
Yep.
And I'm here for that messy middle.
Yeah.
Yes.
Me too.
I
And normally,
just noticed what time it is.
Yeah, normally I would say, okay, last thoughts, but I think that was actually a beautiful last thought, bringing it right back. So I am going to end it here, and I'm going to say that Molly and I don't get any last thoughts. Unless Molly really, really, really wants to do last thoughts. Otherwise, I'm going to go on and
No.
end this where we are.
That was a beautiful summary.
Yeah, it was gorgeous. It was perfect. Okay, everybody, thanks for listening to Drudgery, Dreams, and In Between, a weekly live broadcast coming to you every Tuesday at 9 a.m. Central, 7 a.m. Pacific. Subscribe now wherever podcasts are found. If you'd like to support the podcast, be sure to leave a rating and review and share with your friends. To catch all the latest from us, visit us at drudgeryanddreams.com and follow on your favorite social media platforms at Drudgery and Dreams. Thanks again. See you next time.
See everybody.